and innovation, as we see President Xi there walking the red carpet, lined here with an honor guard at the palace there in the country's capital. This is a critical meeting, a critical gathering here of the leaders of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These BRICS members have a strong trade partnership, with Brazil being China's biggest source of soybeans, which is critical to China's agricultural industry. As we see the handshake there between the leaders of Brazil and China there. A warm greeting, big smiles, friendly relationship. As we mentioned, a critical partnership between these two countries. Soybeans, by the way, as we mentioned, is a product at the forefront of the trade war between China and the United States. So China making it very clear that it is willing to do business with Brazil, a big exporter of soybeans, which is critical to the Chinese agricultural industry. This meeting here that we're watching, this comes just ahead of this year's BRICS summit, which, as we mentioned, Brazil is hosting. This is the third time it has hosted the BRICS gathering, once in 2010, also 2014. BRICS is an organization of 5 major emerging economies. These leaders are expected to focus not just on trade and investment and economic issues, but also on technology and international crime. The environment will also very likely be discussed here. President Xi will also speak with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, after this meeting here with Bolsonaro. That's going to happen later in the afternoon. And of course, the summit going on for 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday. It is now Wednesday morning in South America. It is Wednesday evening here as we watch the leaders of Brazil and China walk along the palace, a grand structure there, pose for photos, smiles, handshakes. Trade between these two countries, obviously critical issue, something that will very likely be discussed in depth there. And we, of course, will have much more coverage in the coming hours here of this BRICS summit in the coming days here as President Xi spends some time in Brazil. This is coming after a trip in Greece, where he spent a couple of days in Athens looking to build ties there. Let's talk about this with our guest here in the studio, Professor John Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. So as we watch these pictures, Professor Gong, of the meeting between President Xi and President Bolsonaro, tell us what is going to be the thing you're going to be watching out most for during this BRICS summit?
Well, at this BRICS summit, I'll be very interested in looking at any progress or agreements regarding innovation among these 5 countries. I think economic development has been a long-standing theme among these countries. Now they have added innovation aspect in this time. So I would be interested in looking at what new progress have they made among in terms of cooperation among these 5
And why
countries.
do you mention that? Why is innovation such a focus?
Well, I think innovation is one of the things they want to emphasize. Development, economic development, and innovation. I think innovation is important, especially in the context of global economic slowdown and global economic protectionism going on. So I think as developing countries, as emerging markets, what these countries can do among themselves in area of innovation, technology, cooperation is something of very much interest to me and to the other countries.
I mean, you mentioned protectionism, and of course we have to talk about the trade war here between China and the United States. How do you think that's going to be an impact with the Chinese leader as he visits Brazil?
Well, the first thing is that Brazil has benefited immensely from this trade war.
You mentioned the soybeans.
The soybean,
yeah, the soybean.
it's China's buying tons and tons of soybean from Brazil. So I think Brazil is probably secretly congratulating that we're engaged in a trade war with the United States. But of course, it's going to change. I think the first phase agreement will be signed between President Xi and President Trump. In that regard, I think imports of soybean from Brazil will probably curtailed a little bit. But other than that, I think there's more areas of cooperation, especially I think investment from China in South American countries, including Brazil, of course. It has a very very promising future, in my opinion. Yeah, go ahead.
And when you look at the BRICS nations here, I mean, these are wildly different countries: Russia, India, China, South Africa, Brazil, China. When you look at these wildly different countries, these different economies, what do you think are the biggest challenges to to build better cooperation among these 5 nations? What is the biggest holdback?
Well, I think the largest bottleneck pertains to the area of geopolitics. As you know, China and India has a problem. This is a territorial dispute, and also currently India and Pakistan is sort of engaged in the dispute over Kashmir, and China's Belt and Road Initiative with Pakistan, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, cuts right through Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, which is an area that India claims to be its own territory. So I think there's a political aspect, there's a geopolitical aspect of it, and I think that represents the biggest challenge. And also, China and India also may have some differences with respect to economic cooperation and trade. For example, India refuses to sign on RCEP negotiation, which is something that China is actively participating together with ASEAN countries, and that's also a big challenge in my opinion.
All right, we'll see what develops in the coming days. Professor John Gong, thanks for your time today. We appreciate it. And of course, we'll have much more coverage in the coming hours of the BRICS Summit as the leaders there get into place, arriving there in the Brazilian capital. But for now, that is latest news from around the world today. I'm Jonathan Betts, live in Beijing. I'll be back in about 45 minutes with a link. Keep it here. This is CGTN.